Informed Choice Radio, episode 517, Money Secrets with Sarah Porretta.
Live from Sundial House Studios, this is Informed Choice Radio. Want to make the most of your money and your life? You've come to the right place. Now, here's your host, Martin Bamford.
As a nation, we are notoriously secretive about our money. Yet, while the COVID-19 pandemic is causing financial uncertainty for many of us, it is better to build resilience now by opening up to someone about money worries to help us cope better with what the future may throw at us. My guest on the podcast today is Sarah Porretta. She is Strategy and Insights Director at the Money and Pensions Service, or MaPS. Prior to MaPS, Sarah was Head of Financial Inclusion and Education at Lloyds Banking Group, where she created a group-wide multi-brand strategy for financial inclusion and education. During this time, she also chaired UK Finance's Financial Inclusion and Capability Forum. In this episode, we chat about new research which found that 30% of people say their other half does not know how much their annual income is. In fact, 38% of us stay completely silent about money worries because of embarrassment or fear about being judged. Here's my conversation with Sarah Porretta, Strategy and Insights Director at the Money and Pension Service, in episode 517 of Informed Choice Radio. So Sarah, perhaps you could start by just introducing yourself to us. Tell us a bit about you and what you do, and a bit about MaPS as well for people who aren't familiar with it.
Sure. So I'm Sarah Porretta. I'm the Strategy and Insights Director for the Money and Pension Service. My day job in the last 2 years has been working towards publishing a UK strategy for financial wellbeing. So last year we spent a lot of time talking to over 1,000 stakeholders and saying, what are the real enablers of wellbeing? When we published our strategy in January, obviously just before the COVID crisis hit. In terms of my remit, I look after research and insights, so really building an evidence base about what works in terms of financial wellbeing. And I also look after policy, so we then take that evidence and have conversations with policymakers, with financial services, with the regulator, about what can be done to improve financial wellbeing in the UK. And then in terms of MaPS and what MaPS does, so MaPS was created coming up for a couple of years ago now, and it brought together the Money Advice Service, which is a money guidance organisation with a website and telephone guidance, and then the Pensions Advisory Service, which is a general pensions guidance service with a whole team of experts available to help consumers with their pensions needs, and also PensionWise, which is an appointment for over 50s. So we're an arm's length body, which means we're backed by government, but we have our own independent board. And we're still forming and norming as an organisation, I think, having brought those three organisations into one. But we have a statutory remit to coordinate that UK strategy that I talked about. And then also we commission debt advice and we deliver money and pensions guidance ourselves as well.
Fantastic. I know we're going to talk today about some research you've recently published to coincide with Talk Money Week and what Talk Money Week's all about. But can I just bring you back firstly to that financial well-being phrase? So I think we all probably understand what well-being is. It's things like yoga and going for a run, isn't it? And looking after ourselves. But financial well-being, how does that, how would you describe financial well-being?
Well, I'm kind of increasingly seeing financial well-being as the third point of a triangle, which includes physical well-being and mental well-being. So for us, financial well-being is about being in control of your money, about being confident dealing with your money and making the most of your money and pensions. And it underpins health and mental well-being as well, because how you spend your money and how you live your life in your financial life can have a big impact on your mental well-being and also your physical well-being as well. So I kind of feel like it's an area where there's a real opportunity for growth in the UK, for more people to think, do you know what, I need to invest in my financial well-being. And we've seen a real sea change over the last 10 years in terms of awareness of the importance of mental well-being. But I don't think we've quite seen that shift in the UK yet around financial well-being, and I'd like to see that change.
And I guess part of that change is the campaign that you're running this week, Talk Money Week. So what's that campaign all about? What's the purpose of it?
Well, this is a week that we run every year. So back in the seeds of time, it was called Financial Capability Week. And we changed the name 2 years ago to Talk Money Week. And this is really for us about raising awareness of financial wellbeing during this particular week. But there's a really important piece of this for us, which is we're a relatively small organisation. We're 300 strong. And our role in law is to coordinate a UK strategy for financial wellbeing. But in order to do that, we need a whole range of organisations across the UK to really pick up the mantle and do their bit in financial wellbeing. So whether that's a financial services organisation or a local council or a charity that supports young offenders, or a school, or a whole range of organisations. What we need as a nation is for all those organisations to understand why financial wellbeing is important for their customers, for their staff, and then to do something really positive about that. So this week is really about multiple organisations coming together and making a concerted effort to reach out to consumers and staff all across the UK to talk money, to really kind of address money and pensions issues in this particular week. And obviously it's not really just about doing it this 1 week. It's about doing it all the time, but this week is a real area of focus for us.
And you've published some research with some quite fascinating findings in it, which I guess is a great prompt for all of these different organisations to have conversations about money and to get this conversation going. So if we could talk about some of those, I think the first one, which I found fascinating, is about a third of people aren't aware of how much their partner earns, even approximately.
No, so the research showed us all sorts of surprising things actually about how secretive people are about their money. So it showed us that 40% of people are keeping secrets from their loved ones about financial products. And that's 21 million people, just to put that into context, across the UK. And what we also found, which I think is even more surprising, is that that goes up when you get to millennials. So for 25 to 34-year-olds, 59%, so almost 6 in 10 people are keeping secrets about money and about the products that they have as well. So that's not a great sign really in terms of people's willingness to talk about money in the UK.
And why do you think that is, that younger people are more secretive about money? Was it a particular type of financial product they were secretive about? Was it more about their income or more about maybe debts and loans and some things like that?
So it's a range of things. So it was a range of hidden credit cards. So 36% of people were hiding credit cards. 23% of people were disguising personal loans. And then actually about 21% were looking at keeping secrets about savings. So it's a mix of debts and credit and savings. And, this is the one that I'd really like to get on the skin of. And I run a research team as part of my role. But, we see millennials, I think, as a generation that share a lot because, the advent of social media, they've grown up in a world of social media and sharing. And yet what this shows to us is that there is a kind of real taboo around money. It's probably the last taboo if you look at what people are willing to share in other parts of their lives. And that, that isn't a healthy thing. And we have lots of research that links mental health and money worries. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. So we know the Money and Mental Health Policy Institute is a great organisation funded and set up by Martin Lewis. And that organisation has put out some really interesting research looking at different types of mental health conditions and how people with those conditions can demonstrate certain behaviours around money. So in some cases, for example, it might be that when people are having a tough time, they go on spending sprees. So they've done a lot of research about that. And then on the flip side, we know that people who are experiencing money difficulties will then experience higher levels of stress and anxiety. So money worries can then be a trigger for mental health challenges. So that chicken and egg is a kind of a bit of a perfect storm for people around money. And, if we know then that 6 in 10 young people are keeping secrets about money, that means that if things are going wrong with their finances, they're kind of suffering in silence, and that isn't good for their mental health. So it is a big, it's a big issue for society if people aren't talking about and looking after their financial well-being.
And this, I guess, relates back to your triangle with physical and mental well-being and financial well-being. And the research you mentioned from Money and Mental Health Policy Institute I found was fascinating. In people who have suffered for poor mental health in the last couple of years, more than twice as likely to have overspent with online shopping. And as you say, it's these sort of symptoms, isn't it? Common symptoms if you suffer for poor mental health: impulsivity and lack of morale, low morale, things like that, which can then cause you to go out and have a bit of a splurge on online shops and make yourself feel better because you're an emotional spender. But going back to your point, Sarah, about younger people very willing to share lots of aspects of their lives on social media. You only have to look at Instagram to see the oversharing that takes place, but seemingly quite reluctant to share stuff about money. So what do you think makes money such a taboo subject?
I mean, I think culturally as a nation, it's very embarrassing for us, isn't it? It's very British to not talk about money and not reveal your salary and not talk openly, even actually not talk openly about your aspirations around money. And then the flip side of that coin, because those are kind of positive things, aren't they? I'd like to earn this much or whatever. And in other cultures, that's not the case. And we know in China, for example, it's kind of more acceptable to ask people how much they earn. And I worked in Japan actually for a few years when I was younger, and a very different approach to talking about money there. And I have a lot of American friends, and they're more kind of aspirational about their career goals in terms of money. But no, in Britain, we find it all kind of quite embarrassing, and it's almost a hush-hush subject, that it's sort of vulgar to talk about money. And I think it's surprising, I guess, that what this research suggests, doesn't necessarily prove, but it suggests, is that culture isn't changing. So in fact, it's kind of getting worse. So young people find it even more difficult to talk about money. So I think there's that. I think there's the cultural factor. And then what we know from this research is that people talk about shame and embarrassment of talking about money. So that's still really strong. And we know through COVID that certain groups have been disproportionately affected by the COVID pandemic, and young people are in that category. And also Black and minority ethnic groups are also in that category. And I actually, my team pulled together a roundtable last week, which was looking at Black and minority ethnic communities and money. And what we heard on that loud and clear from, it was quite a wide-ranging group of people that were on that roundtable, is that they said that even more so in some of their communities, that shame factor was huge, and there was a real stigma about admitting if you were having problems with money. And there were also lots of pressures, additional pressures on those communities as well, in terms of big expensive weddings, and also just practical things like having to care for a wider family network, or family overseas and things like that. So I think it's a very sort of intertwined cultural issue in lots of the communities that we have across the UK.
And we're living through a global pandemic at the moment. Clearly, that's going to have some quite significant economic ramifications. As you said just then, particularly for younger people, job losses is a big issue at the moment. We're seeing rising unemployment. So do you think this ability to have open conversations about money, about income, about debt is more important during a pandemic?
Well, I mean, just you mentioned a few of the changes there, but we've been looking at what impacts the pandemic has been having across savings, credit, debt, etc. So we know that by April we'd seen 16 million adults were using their savings to cover living costs, and 6 million adults had accessed an overdraft or borrowed more on a credit card. And we then started looking at debt modelling, so what we thought might happen in terms of the demand for debt advice. And so we've been working with government on agreeing additional funding for debt advice. But we know that will rise, and we're predicting it will rise a lot. And so, in the context of that, all those changes and, people having to deplete their savings if they even had any, and then using credit probably to live day to day. And then, at the moment with forbearance schemes and furlough and things, there are some support networks which are keeping people out of debt. But when those schemes start to wind up, we expect that we'll see more people accessing debt advice. So, but in the context of that, it means that there are more people experiencing financial difficulty. So it's more likely than ever that some of your friends, your family, your neighbours are experiencing financial difficulty. And yet what this research is saying is that we're still not willing to talk about it and share those problems. So I think there is an opportunity here to turn that around and actually try and, get across to people that, you're not alone. There's no shame and embarrassment. This is a unprecedented global pandemic, and people that have done all the right things all through their lives with money are now in financial difficulty. And so, there's a lot of benefit in sharing that and helping each other through it.
If people are reluctant to speak to loved ones about some of these issues, particularly about debt, do you think they're able to pick up the phone and speak to a debt charity, a stranger, effectively, about what's a very personal and probably quite a distressing time of their life?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always a barrier, isn't it, for anyone? For the first step is to recognise that actually things are out of control and that you need to get some help, because we know that the first thing people do when things start to go wrong is try and fix it themselves. So they might borrow money from friends and family, or they might use kind of short-term high-cost credit to or their overdraft to see them through that tricky time. But at some point, most people will reach a point where they do realise they need some help. But ideally, people would do that a lot earlier, so they wouldn't sort of try and keep the wolves from the door using maybe methods that are not going to pay off for them in the long run, and they access advice earlier. But I've done a lot of radio interviews this week as part of Talk Money Week, and the message that I would try and land is, I listen in on debt advice calls and also pensions guidance, because of course some people, it's their pension that they're worrying about this time, not a debt. And the people that are picking up those phones and all those services, whether it's Step Change or National Debt Line or the Pensions Advisory Service that we run, those people are doing that job because what gets them out of bed in the morning and what keeps them motivated is helping people. And so that's what they're there for. So a good day for them is when they do speak to you and then they are able to help you. And then the other thing is that they have heard it all before. There's almost nothing that you could call up about in terms of money difficulties that they will not have heard before. And then also we know that just under half of the people that access debt advice services have challenges with their mental health. So again, that isn't a barrier either, because the people on those phones have heard and are talking to people every day who are suffering with mental ill health. So I get that it's a barrier for people to pick up the phone and get that help, but it genuinely shouldn't be. And if you do pick up and call those services, you will be treated with respect and empathy.
Yeah, as you say, they've heard it all before. There's no judgment, and these are true professionals. It's a bit like going to see the doctor and sort of sharing an embarrassing medical condition. They're not going to laugh at you. They're not going to judge you. They're going to help you, because that's why they're doing it and what they're all about.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Now, you touched on pensions there. So if I can just ask one more question at the end, which is, I know there was some news recently about the pensions dashboard and the updated timetable for that. So where are we at with the pensions dashboard, this ability to see all of our different pension pots and pension benefits on one screen, one device, and then understand the bigger picture?
Yeah, so it's still very much a priority for government and for the Money and Pension Service to continue developing the dashboard. And with pensions, the real challenge is always around engagement, isn't it? Because I set it as a task for myself 2 Talk Money weeks ago, which was to hunt down my pensions, because I've worked, I've moved around charity sector, private sector, etc. Hunt down my pensions, get to the bottom of it. And if I hadn't set myself that task as part of Talk Money Week, I think I probably would have abandoned it, but I carried on. And the pensions dashboard is designed to kind of remove that barrier, I guess, and give you a single window into your pensions. But I think we recognise as a guidance organisation that there will still be a challenge around engagement as well, about getting people really interested in wanting to know what's going on with their pensions, and also understanding what it means for them and what it means for their future, and being able to understand what their pensions pot now translates into as a lifestyle in the future. And so, yeah, lots of challenges around that. And one of the areas that we've been looking at as part of our UK strategy development work is particularly looking at women and engaging women with pensions. And women make decisions all through their lives, if they might be going part-time when they've just had a child, or they might be going off on maternity leave, and they don't, I have 2 young children. I didn't think about my pension when I was looking at what my working pattern would be or what I was doing on my maternity leave. And yet I was making decisions at that point without knowing it that will impact my pension in retirement. So there's a lot for us to do, I think, around engaging people throughout their lives, recognizing which groups are more vulnerable and who has the poorer outcomes in terms of pensions, and women being the largest group that have poorer outcomes, and then engaging them. And then obviously the dashboard then becomes a really amazing tool to help with that engagement once it comes online.
How did it feel once you'd tracked down your pensions and sort of seen it all in one place?
Well, this is slightly embarrassing to admit, but I had worked at BAA when I was a bit younger, and I was kind of mid-20s at the time, and I had been in a final salary pension scheme, but I had not understood that at all and the relevance of that at the time, and hadn't thought about it since that day. And then when I started tracking down pensions, I realised that one chunk of my pension was actually a final salary scheme, which I hadn't realised. So yeah, that was good. It was a really good learning experience, and actually I think about that experience a lot, because obviously my job is thinking about how to engage consumers, and being a consumer in that process where I didn't really understand what my own pensions looked like at the time has given me a lot of insight, which is really great.
No, that's great to hear. It's always best to know, isn't it? I think so many people, when it comes to their finances, they take that sort of bury their head in the sand approach, and if they don't look at it, it will go away. And I think it's always better to know. And once you know, you can take some action, decide what you need to do next.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the big penny dropping for me actually was not so much for me. It was actually my husband. So our family setup is that my husband went part-time when we had children. And he actually didn't start paying into a pension until he was a lot older than I was. And so we had the kind of reverse gender shock of realizing that actually we needed to look at my husband's future, because he'd made some choices about his future pensions income that we'd overlooked. So yeah, it was a good exercise, I think, for him as well.
No, absolutely. Sarah, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for coming on to Informed Choice Radio. Before I let you go, where can we go for sort of further links and guidance and that sort of thing?
So first stop is moneyadviceservice.org.uk website. And I didn't mention this earlier, but we have developed a money navigator tool as a response to COVID. So if you go into that, you're able to go in, put in some information, and it will guide you to the best services. So it might be that it takes you off in the direction of debt advice, or it might be that it takes you off to our pensions guidance services. But the money navigator tool is a great place to start. If you're listening and you want to go straight to debt advice, that's what you need. We have a debt advice locator tool on our website, which will help you find local services. Or if you have a pensions query, I recommend you go straight to the pensions advisory service. And I share an office with the people that man the phones there, and they are absolute experts, often with many, many years in the industry, and hugely passionate about what they do. And so, yeah, go there and check that out. And the only final thing I would add is if you're over 50, you could look at a PensionWise appointment, and you can access that through the Money Advice Service website, or go straight to the PensionWise brand to book an appointment for that. So that should give you the full range of help, guidance and advice that you might need.
Yeah, whatever stage of your financial life you're at, there's somewhere to go there. So what I'll make sure I do, Sarah, is pop in our show notes for this episode links to each of those areas. And then listeners, if they want to go off and find, debt location or pensions wise guidance, they can do so. And just to endorse what you said about the pensions advisory service, we've had dealings with some of the people that run the helplines there, and they are as knowledgeable, if not more knowledgeable, than pension geeks like me. So absolutely the right people to speak to about any aspects of pensions. Sarah, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us today on Informed Choice Radio.
Thank you for inviting me on.